10 famous stars who lost their lives in the 1980s. But why? What happened to the famous stars who had everything in the 80s that they lost their lives, or was being a star too heavy a burden for them? They were legends, icons. In the 80s and surrounding years, numerous African-American celebrities who defined an era with their talent lost their lives at a young age and ultimately faced tragedy. What no one tells you is that behind the fame and glamour lie personal struggles and dramatic downfalls. Here are 10 famous people who lost their lives. 1. Marvin Gaye. But not all things are what they seem. Marvin Gaye was the soulful voice of Motown, a musical genius who gave the world classics like What's Going On and Sexual Healing. By the early 1980s, he was riding a creative high, a Grammy-winning album and legendary performances, including a mesmerizing national anthem at the 1983 NBA All-Star Game. Yet behind closed doors, Gaye's life was unraveling. He struggled with depression, paranoia, and a cocaine habit that haunted him even as he returned to stardom. The thing nobody tells you is that Marvin's greatest battle was not on stage, but at home, against his own demons and a turbulent relationship with his father. On April 1st, 1984, the unthinkable happened. In a heated family argument, Marvin intervened to protect his mother, and it escalated violently. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., retrieved the very .38 pistol that Marvin had gifted him for safety just months before and fatally shot his son point-blank in the chest. It was the day before Marvin Gaye's 45th birthday. News so shocking, many thought it was a cruel April Fool's joke. The first bullet pierced Marvin's heart, ending his life almost instantly. In the aftermath, the world was stunned. A legendary artist killed by his own father, who pleaded that it was self-defense. Gaye's tragic end sent ripples through music. Tributes poured in, and over time his death inspired songs and stories trying to make sense of the senseless. Marvin Gaye's legacy as the Prince of Motown lives on, but so does the haunting tale of his final day, a cautionary tale of family conflict and mental anguish that even fame could not cure. 2. Rick James. Rick, the king of funk in the 1980s. Super freak, blasting from boomboxes, wild on-stage persona, and a string of platinum hits. He sold millions of records and inspired a generation with his blend of rock and funk. Yet what many overlooked is that Rick's life was veering out of control behind the scenes. By the late 80s, his outrageous party lifestyle had given way to darkness, heavy drug addiction, run-ins with the law, and a descent from superstardom. In the early 90s, James was convicted for horrific assaults while high, including imprisoning and torturing a woman in a drug-fueled rage, crimes that landed him in prison for over 2 years. The super freak singer who once bragged about being an icon of drug use and eroticism was by then a broken man, suffering a stroke in 1998 that left him fragile. Amazingly, Rick James tried to mount a comeback in 2004, even finding a new audience with a comedic appearance on Chappelle's show where he poked fun at his own wild past. But that same year, tragedy struck. On August 6, 2004, Rick was found dead at 56, succumbing to a heart attack in his Los Angeles home. When the toxicology report came back, it revealed a chilling truth. 9 different drugs were in his system, from cocaine to methamphetamine and prescription sedatives. Officials said none were at lethal levels individually, but together and after years of abuse, they likely contributed to his early demise. But not all things are what they seem. Fans initially feared it was an overdose. The coroner clarified it was a heart attack, yet one undoubtedly aggravated by his decades of excess. At his funeral, in a bittersweet final tribute, a giant joint was lit and passed among mourners, a darkly fitting send-off for a man whose life was defined by music and mayhem. Rick James is remembered today not just for his funk anthems, but as a cautionary figure of rock star excess, a talent who flew high and fell hard, leaving behind music that still grooves and a story that still warns. 3. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway's voice was magic, a velvet smooth soul that gave us classics like A Song for You and the eternal Christmas staple, This Christmas. In the early 1970s, he was riding high as a soul music genius, winning a Grammy with Roberta Flack. and influencing artists from Stevie Wonder to Amy Winehouse. The thing nobody tells you is how Hathaway secretly battled inner demons even as his star rose. He suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia and depression, a fact kept mostly private while he made music that uplifted others. By 1979, Donny was struggling greatly with his mental health. He had been prescribed heavy medications, but friends said he often skipped them, leading to frightening delusions. What many overlooked is that Hathaway's erratic behavior was a cry for help from a man at war with his own mind. On January 13, 1979, during a recording session for a new project with Roberta Flack, Donny's paranoia spiked. He spoke of machines stealing his music and people trying to kill him. The session was halted, and hours later, tragedy struck. Donny Hathaway was found dead on the sidewalk beneath the 15th floor window of his New York hotel. He had plunged to his death, the window's glass deliberately removed and the door chained from the inside. Investigators found no sign of struggle and ruled it a suicide. He was only 33. The soul music world was shaken. This gentle genius who sang of hope and love in songs like "Someday We'll All Be Free" had been unable to free himself from despair. Some who knew him whispered questions. Was it really suicide, or could something else have happened? A locked room and carefully removed window pane left haunting mysteries. But officially, Donny Hathaway had taken his own life, another victim of silent mental illness. His funeral was led by Reverend Jesse Jackson, and tributes like the Whispers' "Song for Donny" poured out. Hathaway's fall from a hotel window remains one of music's great tragedies, a reminder that extraordinary talent does not shield one from extraordinary pain. Today, he is remembered as one of the greatest soul singers of all time, his influence heard in countless artists, and his fragile story spurring more open conversations about mental health and artistry. 4. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman's voice could soar and seduce, a statuesque jazz and R&B chanteuse who dazzled in the late 70s and 80s with hits like "You Know How to Love Me." She lit up Broadway in Sophisticated Ladies and earned devoted fans for her soulful, sultry style. But not all things are what they seem. Behind Phyllis's confident stage persona lived deep despair. By the early 1990s, she had fallen into a spiral of clinical depression, bipolar disorder, and addiction. Researchandideas.com. She openly spoke of loneliness and the struggle to find love, and her weight and self-esteem issues were tabloid fodder. What many overlooked is how her personal tragedies piled up. Within 1 month in 1993, Phyllis lost her mother, grandmother, and a close friend, plunging her further into darkness. Researchandideas.com. Researchandideas.com. She poured all this pain into her music. In fact, her final album, I Refuse to Be Lonely, recorded in the 2 years before her death, is chillingly prophetic. Nearly every song sounds like a farewell, with lyrics about isolation and giving up that in hindsight read like cries for help. Researchandideas.com. Researchandideas.com. On June 30th, 1995, just a week before her 46th birthday, Phyllis Hyman broke. Hours before she was due on stage at the Apollo Theater, she took a lethal mix of vodka and Tuinal, a barbiturate sleeping pill, in her New York apartment. Researchandideas.com. Researchandideas.com. She was found unconscious that afternoon and that evening, a suicide from overdose. Researchandideas.com. She left behind a heart-wrenching note that read in part, "I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you." Researchandideas.com. The world of music was stunned, but for those close to her, not entirely surprised. Phyllis had long spoken of being tired of life's pain. Researchandideas.com. The thing nobody tells you is how much planning may have gone into her final exit. It's said she chose that day for maximum dramatic effect, the diva in her making a final, tragic statement. Indeed, her friend and manager noted how Phyllis timed it just before a show, as if to ensure people truly saw her pain at lastresearchandideas.com. Phyllis Hyman's death underscored the silent suffering many artists endure. Today she's remembered for that rich, silky voice and songs that cut to the bone. Her last album stands as an eerie epitaph. Listening to its closing track, "Give Me One Good Reason to Stay," now can send chills down anyone's spine. researchandideas.com. Phyllis's legacy is a mix of musical elegance and the poignant caution that even those who refuse to be lonely may still feel unbearably alone. 5. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton seemed to embody joy. With her 5-octave vocal range and the blissful 1975 hit Lovin' You, she left an indelible mark on music. Her ethereal whistle notes and warm presence made her a beloved figure in R&B. Yet the thing nobody tells you is that at the height of her sunshine, Minnie was fighting a private war. In January 1976, at just 28 years old, she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer and given only a few months to live. Minnie made a brave choice. She went public with her illness at a time when cancer was discussed in whispers. She underwent a radical mastectomy and continued to perform and record, determined to use her platform to spread awareness. What many overlooked is how truly pioneering she was, becoming one of the first celebrities to openly campaign for breast cancer awareness. In 1978, weak but radiant, she received the American Cancer Society's Courage Award from President Jimmy Carter at the White House. She kept smiling through pain, often performing with her young children, including daughter Maya Rudolph, who watched from the wings as her mom sang lullabies on stage. Minnie's battle, however, was one she could not win. By mid-1979, the cancer had spread. On July 12, 1979, Minnie Riperton died in Los Angeles, aged only 31. She passed away at home 2 weeks before her daughter Maya's 7th birthday. Her death, though expected, was heartbreaking. The music world lost that once-in-a-generation voice far too soon. Fans only learned later just how bravely she had carried on. In her final year, Minnie recorded music and even made television appearances despite pain, never losing that bright smile. But not all things are what they seem, and behind that smile was a woman making peace with leaving her family and legacy behind. When the news broke, it resonated deeply. Here was a vibrant young mother and star who had been taken by a disease still spoken of in hushed tones. Minnie's openness helped demystify breast cancer for many black women who saw their own struggles in hers. Today, she's remembered not just for the impossible high notes of Lovin' You, which she famously cooed as a lullaby for Maya in the studio, but for her courage. Minnie Riperton's life, though short, opened conversations about health in the black community and left behind a musical legacy of love. On her tombstone, the lyrics she sang ring true. Lovin' you is easy, 'cause you're beautiful. Easy to love and so hard to lose. 6. Roger Troutman. Roger Troutman brought funk and futuristic flair to the 80s with his talkbox and the band Zap. He put the zap in funk classics like More Bounce to the Ounce, and later lent his computerized vocals to hip-hop hits like Tupac's California Love. On stage, he was a showman with a signature electronic vocal, influencing West Coast sound for decades. Yet Roger's story ended in a manner as shocking as any Greek tragedy. What many overlooked is that behind the band's success were intense family dynamics and business tensions. Roger and his brothers built a mini music empire in Ohio, with Roger as the charismatic frontman and his older brother, Larry, managing operations. By the late 90s, Zap's heyday had passed, and rumors swirled of financial strain and sibling conflict. The thing nobody tells you about fame in a family act is how internal rifts can turn deadly. On an April morning in 1999, as Roger arrived at his Dayton recording studio, gunshots rang out. Roger Troutman, 47, was ambushed and shot multiple times in the torso outside the studio around 7 a.m. Critically wounded, he died in the hospital shortly after. Minutes later, police found his brother Larry, 54, in a car a few blocks away, dead from a gunshot to his head in what appeared to be a suicide. The news broke. It was an apparent murder-suicide. Shocked friends and fans struggled to comprehend how and why Larry would kill Roger then himself. The brothers who created music together died in violence together. To this day, the precise motive remains clouded. Some who knew them cite money troubles in their businesses. Others whisper about personal grievances, but no definitive answer ever emerged. What's clear is that the tragedy was immense. The funeral saw an outpouring of grief from the funk community. Hundreds of mourners, fellow musicians like Bootsy Collins and the Ohio Players, paying respects. In a heartbreaking scene, Roger and Larry lay in open caskets side by side, as if even in death their fates were bound together. Roger Troutman slaying by his own brother is one of music's most shocking finales. It robbed the world of a pioneering artist whose influence echoes in countless R&B and hip-hop tracks. Zapp continues to tour with remaining family, keeping the groove alive, but Roger's absence is palpable. We're left with the records and the reminder that success can sometimes mask deadly fractures within. The Troutman tragedy underscores that sometimes our worst enemies come from within our own circle, turning love and genius into sorrow. 7. Florence Ballard. Florence Flo Ballard was a founding member of the Supremes, the most successful girl group of all time. In the 60s, Flo's powerhouse vocals and charm helped propel hits like Where Did Our Love Go and Baby Love. On stage, dressed in elegant gowns beside Diana Ross and Mary Wilson, Flo seemed to be on top of the world. A poor Detroit girl turned global superstar. But not all things are what they seem. Inside Motown, Florence Ballard's story was one of dreams deferred and spirits broken. By 1967, after years of struggling with the spotlight shifting to Diana Ross, Flo's relationship with Motown had soured. She was removed from the Supremes that year, essentially fired from the group she helped create, due to conflicts and what Berry Gordy perceived as unprofessional behavior, partly fueled by Flo's growing alcoholism. The thing nobody tells you is how swiftly a star can fall. 1 minute on Ed Sullivan, the next minute out in the cold. Flo received a one-time settlement from Motown, around $160,000, but incredibly, through bad advice and alleged mismanagement, even outright theft by lawyers, as some sources claim, that money vanished. By the early 1970s, Florence Ballard, the original girl group princess, was living in poverty. Flo's post-Supremes life was heartbreakingly hard. She battled alcoholism, depression, and poverty while raising 3 young daughters. At her lowest, Flo had to apply for welfare, and her weight ballooned from the despair and health issues. Still, she tried to fight back. In 1975, Flo staged a small comeback. She performed in Detroit and got standing ovations from loyal fans. For a moment, it seemed the public still loved her. She even began recording demos for a possible solo deal. What many overlooked is how frail Flo's health had become. Years of drinking, partly to numb the pain of sickle cell anemia and heartbreak, had damaged her body. On February 22, 1976, Florence Ballard died suddenly at age 32 in Detroit from a coronary thrombosis, a heart attack. It was shocking how quickly it happened. One day she was reportedly hopeful about the future. The next day she was gone. Those close to her mourned deeply. Diana Ross footed the funeral costs and even dedicated a song to Flo on stage. Yet the wider world barely took notice. One of the original Supremes died, and there was only a small ripple of news. To some, it felt like society had moved on too quickly from Flo, just as Motown had years before. Today, Florence Ballard's legacy has been re-evaluated. She is seen as a symbol of both the brilliance of Motown and its most tragic casualty, the lost Supreme. Each time a Supreme song plays, Flo's voice is there in the harmonies, her legacy renewed every hour of every day as those golden hits continue to enchant. Her story serves as a poignant reminder. The spotlight can be cruelly fickle, and the industry's pressure can break even the brightest of talents. Flo Ballard's rise and fall remain one of music history's most bittersweet tales. A shining star extinguished too soon, but never forgotten. Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield was the soul of the civil rights era, a gentle musical giant who gave us empowering anthems like People Get Ready, with the impressions and the funky soundtrack to Superfly. Through the 60s and 70s, he pushed soul music to speak about social change, earning a place among the legends. By 1990, Mayfield was still performing and revered as an icon. Then, in a split second, tragedy struck in a way no one could foresee. On August 13th, 1990, Curtis Mayfield was on stage for an outdoor concert in Brooklyn when a freak accident changed everything. A strong gust of wind toppled a lighting rig above him, and it came crashing down on Curtis, striking his neck and back. In that moment, he lost feeling in his body. The impact shattered 3 vertebrae and left him paralyzed from the neck down. But not all things are what they seem. Though Curtis's body was broken, incredibly, his spirit was not. Doctors told him he'd never walk or play guitar again. At 48 years old, Curtis Mayfield became a quadriplegic, facing life in a wheelchair with round-the-clock care. Many would have given up, but Curtis did something astonishing. Within a year or two, he was writing songs again, determined to make music lying flat on his back. The thing nobody tells you is how heroic Curtis was in those years. He recorded an entire final album, New World Order, 1996, by singing one line at a time, lying down so gravity could help his lungs push out air. As his son said, the accident broke his back, but not his spirit. The album earned 3 Grammy nominations, a testament to Mayfield's will and genius. Yet, physically, Curtis's condition worsened over the decade. He suffered complications, failing health, diabetes leading to an amputated leg in 1998. On December 26, 1999, at age 57, Curtis Mayfield died in the Atlanta area, with family by his side. The official cause was complications from diabetes, but it was the long, slow toll of paralysis that truly ended his journey. The world lost a sole visionary, but his final decade left an inspiring legacy of courage. Mayfield's motto could have been, "Keep on pushing." Like his famous song, he lived those words, creating beauty out of tragedy. He was showered with accolades in those years. Hall of Fame inductions, Lifetime Achievement Grammys, which must have affirmed that the world had not forgotten him. Today, Curtis Mayfield is cherished not only for the soundtrack of a revolution he provided in the 60s and 70s, but for his incomparable resilience in the 90s. His story teaches us that even when life strikes a cruel blow, the human spirit can sing on. Curtis's music continues to uplift new generations, and his life story, surviving the unimaginable with grace, stands as a beacon of hope. He broke his back, but not his spirit, and in doing so, Curtis Mayfield showed us the true power of perseverance. Edexis Tammi Terrell. Tammi Terrell was the radiant young duet partner of Marvin Gaye, together creating some of Motown's most enduring love songs. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, You're All I Need to Get By. On stage, Tammi had an electric smile and chemistry with Marvin that made audiences swoon. She was only in her early 20s, and it seemed the world was at her feet. But what many overlooked is that Tammi's fairy tale career masked a nightmare unfolding in her health. In October 1967, while performing with Marvin Gaye at a college show, Tammi suddenly collapsed on stage into Marvin's arms. That horrifying moment signaled something terribly wrong. She was soon diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, just 22 years old. Over the next 2.5 years, Tammi would undergo 8 brain surgeries, each attempt failing to halt the cancer. The thing nobody tells you is how brave Tammi was during this period. She kept recording as long as she could, even as her coordination and sight deteriorated. Marvin Gaye was devastated watching Tammy's decline. He visited her often and even gave her an engagement ring, platonically, to lift her spirits. By early 1970, Tammy's condition was terminal. On March 16, 1970, she passed away from brain cancer in a Philadelphia hospital, barely 24 years old. She died at 8:55 a.m. with her family by her side after fighting with extraordinary courage. Marvin Gaye was crushed. At her funeral, he delivered a eulogy and reportedly could barely get through it. Such was his grief. In fact, those close to Marvin say Tammy's death was a turning point for him. He fell into a deep depression and withdrew from live performing for years. It's often said that Marvin's landmark album, What's Going On, was influenced in part by his despair and questioning after Tammi's illness and passing. Tammi Terrell's story also carried dark subtexts. Not all things are what they seem. Behind Motown's polished image, Tammi had endured abusive relationships, notably with Temptations-led singer David Ruffin, who, rumor had it, once struck her head with a motorcycle helmet during a fight. Some speculated such trauma might have exacerbated her condition, though doctors dismissed the idea that the tumor was caused by any injury. Still, the whispers of these rumors added another layer of tragedy. Tammi's life may have been pained by violence even before illness struck.